Hello, my name is Raquel Gervin, and I'm the Regional Administrator for the FAA's Western Pacific region. We are very pleased that you're able to join us for our virtual public information workshop on the Northern California airspace. In 2015, the Federal Aviation Administration implemented the Northern California Metroplex project. This project was an important and necessary modernization of the region's busy and complex airspace, consistent with the direction from Congress in 2012 to the FAA to modernize the airspace and ensure the continued safety and efficiency of the U.S. transportation system. The Northern California Metroplex project included new satellite arrival and departure routes for several airports in the region, including San Francisco International, Oakland International, and Norman Y. Mineta San Jose International airports. The FAA designed the satellite-based routes to improve the segregation of aircraft routes, increase the predictability of flight paths, and provide air traffic controllers with greater flexibility to manage traffic from multiple airports in a congested airspace. After the FAA implemented the new routes, some communities voiced concerns over some of the changes. As a result, the FAA agreed to consider recommendations from a select committee that area members of Congress established, as well as from community roundtables. Since then, the FAA has committed to meaningful engagement and dialogue to ensure transparency and, where appropriate, opportunities for public comment on the FAA's airspace projects. The FAA already engages actively with the Northern California airport communities through 3 forums: the SFO Airport Community Roundtable, the Oakland Airport Community Noise Management Forum, and the Santa Clara-Santa Cruz Roundtable. Today's meeting is intended to complement that engagement, which allows us to share with the public a holistic review of the operations, challenges, and constraints around some of the busiest and most complex airspace in the United States. While some of you are very familiar with the airspace above Northern California, we understand that this topic may be unfamiliar to others, especially if you have just recently moved into the area. So today, we hope to bring you all up to speed on ongoing airspace efforts in Northern California. We will walk through a plain language breakdown of how we operate the airspace above you. We will provide a detailed explanation of the operation and interaction among the area's 3 major airports. We will lay out the factors like weather, terrain, airport surface limits, and military airspace that create many of the challenges and constraints that must be addressed when making airspace changes. We will also provide an update on some key recommendations from the Select Committee report on South Bay arrivals and other Northern California communities. This meeting will include a live panel question and answer session with the following representatives from the FAA: Melissa Holmes, Assistant General Manager, Oakland District Office; Than McLeod, Manager, Airspace and Procedures, Planning and Requirements; Joseph Burt, National Airspace Analytics Team Lead; and Marina Landis, Environmental Protection Specialist. Because addressing community concerns about aviation is a joint responsibility the FAA shares with the aviation industry, we are pleased to have our airport partners joining us today: San Francisco International Airport, Oakland International Airport, and Norman Y. Mineta San Jose International Airport. In addition, we have representation from passenger and cargo carriers: Alaska Airlines, American Airlines, Delta Airlines, FedEx Express, Southwest Airlines, United Airlines, and airline pilots. They will answer your questions about their operations and offer their perspective. We really appreciate the participation of our panelists who are able to share their expertise as part of this meeting today. I would also like to acknowledge and recognize Airlines for America, A4A, for their help in organizing the outreach to the carriers, and the Airline Pilots Association International, ALPA, for their continued support and participation. The challenges around aviation and noise are complex and must be addressed by the entire aviation community. Thank you again for joining us today. I hope that the information provided and the live Q&A provides value.
This video provides an overview of the Northern California airspace and the numerous airports in the Bay Area. We'll talk about the complexities of the area's airspace, how air traffic operates, and the procedures air traffic controllers use to keep airplanes safely separated. In 2015, the Federal Aviation Administration implemented the Northern California Metroplex project. This project was an important and necessary modernization of the region's busy and complex airspace. It included new satellite arrival and departure routes for several airports in the region. The FAA designed the satellite-based routes to improve the segregation of aircraft routes, increase the predictability of flight paths, and provide air traffic controllers with greater flexibility to manage traffic from multiple airports in a congested airspace. The Northern California airspace is some of the busiest airspace in the United States. Aircraft flying through it operate over a population of more than 6 million people. The region has more than 150 airports, 20 of which have air traffic control towers. These include the Bay Area's 3 major airports: San Francisco International Airport, Oakland International Airport, and Norman Y. Mineta San Jose International Airport. This video focuses on the airspace and air traffic interactions among these 3 major airports. Each of these 3 major airports has its own airspace with dedicated arrival and departure routes. Similarly, the numerous smaller airports and military bases in the region also have their own dedicated arrival and departure routes. The different airports serve a wide range of aircraft with different performance characteristics, including speed, maneuverability, and climb and descent capabilities. There are numerous locations where departure and arrival routes cross over and under one another. It is critical to keep different types of aircraft and different traffic flows separated from each other. As guided by our congressional mandate, the primary responsibility of the air traffic control system is to provide the safe, orderly, and expeditious flow of air traffic. This is accomplished by a team of air traffic controllers that ensure airplanes are safely separated while maintaining the most efficient flow of air traffic. Air traffic control requires great precision and is highly complex. To safely manage this complex, 3-dimensional interaction throughout the national airspace system, air traffic controllers provide air traffic control service in accordance with procedures and regulations. Adding to the complexity, large swaths of military and restricted use airspace are not available for civilian use. All of these elements are puzzle pieces that must fit together as part of the larger national airspace system, or otherwise referred to as the NAS. When an airport is first constructed, the runways are built to align with the most common wind directions in the area. In the Bay Area, winds most frequently come from the northwest. Therefore, at the 3 major airports, San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose, the primary runways are aligned from northwest to southeast. As shown in this animation, the runways at each of the 3 airports are aligned in similar directions. San Francisco has 4 runways. There are 2 parallel runways oriented northwest to southeast, and 2 shorter parallel runways oriented north to south. Oakland has 4 runways. The longest runway is the primary runway for airlines and is oriented northwest to southeast. 3 shorter runways located north of the terminal serve smaller general aviation aircraft. San Jose has 2 parallel runways oriented northwest to southeast. San Francisco and Oakland airports are about 30 miles away from each other, and it can take more than an hour to travel between them on the highway. But in the air, the planes flying into and out of the 2 airports can be as close as 3 to 5 miles from each other. With aircraft traveling over 200 miles per hour, this means the airports are only seconds apart in the sky. Additionally, due to the close proximity of the airports, their flight operations affect one another. Therefore, when one airport changes the runways in use, the other airports must also change the runways in use. As shown in this animation, air traffic controllers must keep the arrivals and departures from each of the 3 main airports safely separated both laterally and vertically. As one example, the west departures from San Jose that are headed to the north must first circle the airport to climb, then proceed north, flying over the arrivals and departures to and from San Francisco and Oakland. This circling departure ensures San Jose departures are properly separated from other air traffic. San Francisco International Airport is surrounded by the bay on the north and densely populated land with varying terrain to the east, west, and south. The airport also has numerous constraints, including closely spaced runways, limited taxiways and movement areas, and rising terrain to the west. There is no room to expand the runway layout. As shown in this animation, the crossing layout of the 4 SFO runways means that aircraft must alternate between 2 arrivals coming in from the southeast, then 2 aircraft departing north, 2 landing, and so forth. Synchronizing this traffic is a complex task that can require vectoring or rerouting arriving aircraft to ensure the timings of the landings are precise. While we think of airspace as the controlling factor for how we move aircraft in and out of airports, the available space on the ground is also important. On a highway, traffic is limited to the number of lanes and by the number of on-ramps and off-ramps. Just as traffic on highway on- and off-ramps backs up, so too does traffic on airport taxiways and other surface areas. The amount of air traffic that can go in and out of an airport is highly dependent on the number of runways, taxiways, and ramps, and how they're configured and spaced. For decades, the airports in San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose have been gateways to the world. All of them, however, operate under significant constraints, including their proximity to one another, surrounding terrain, and runway layout. As a result, their operations can be greatly affected by bad weather or airfield construction, leading to flight delays that can affect the entire national airspace system. Here's an example. On a good weather day with no visibility restrictions, San Francisco can accommodate up to 54 arriving aircraft per hour landing on 2 runways. In this configuration, air traffic controllers direct the aircraft so they are side by side as they approach the airport. Once the pilots of each aircraft confirm they can see each other, they're able to keep their aircraft safely separated on their own and land almost simultaneously. However, when the weather is poor and visibility lowers due to clouds, rain, or fog, we cannot run these simultaneous approaches. That's because pilots may not be able to see other nearby planes. Therefore, they're not allowed to provide their own visual separation from other aircraft. Instead, air traffic controllers keep aircraft safely separated using radar. In these conditions, FAA rules require a 3-mile safety bubble around each aircraft, both tail to nose and laterally as well. Since San Francisco's parallel runways are only 750 feet apart, operations often are reduced to 1 arrival runway. As a result, the airport can only accommodate up to 30 arriving aircraft per hour, landing on 1 runway. Additionally, when weather is poor, air traffic controllers may change the runways in use, which can also affect the number of aircraft able to land and take off. In contrast, other global gateways such as Denver or Chicago have up to 6 runways that are spaced miles apart. This makes it easier for those airports to adapt to weather and construction effects. Many factors affect the airspace in airports in the Bay Area: high traffic volume, proximity of surrounding airports, surrounding terrain, and the number and layout of runways are key factors that affect how we safely and efficiently bring aircraft into and out of the area. For more information, please visit our website.
Hello, my name is Dave Foyle, and I'm the FAA's General Manager for Air Traffic Services for Northern California, which includes all the towers in the Bay Area and Northern California TRACON. Northern California TRACON is the air traffic control facility responsible for separation of aircraft 15,000 feet and below in the greater Bay Area. On the following slides, we will discuss in detail the flight procedures and airspace associated with the Select Committee report. Following this presentation, we'll begin the live Q&A sessions. NorCal TRACON handles aircraft that are arriving to and departing from airports throughout Northern California. We will walk you through the flight procedure poster boards for 3 airports in the Bay Area: San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose International Airports. Each of the following boards shows a sampling of existing published approach and departure procedures. Most boards also show existing flight tracks. Each board will show either arrival or departure aircraft with current day tracks color-coded for arrivals or departures. The flight tracks and procedures are all overlaid on a map of the surrounding area. Each flight procedure board is oriented with north facing up. The name of the airport and the names of the flight procedure are on the top of the board. For example, this board shows two departures from San Francisco International Airport, the Truckin and the Stick. A few acronyms are used by air traffic controllers explaining the boards and in the text. The spelling of each arrival or departure procedure is limited to 5 letters. For example, the spelling of the TRUKN departure is pronounced Truckin. The stars on the board are locations of waypoints, which are fixed navigational points in space that the aircraft fly to. Just as with the spelling of procedures, waypoints are spelled with 5 letters. For example, the PORTE waypoint would be pronounced port. The published flight procedures are colored purple for departures and orange for arrivals. These colored paths show the existing flight paths. Surrounding the paths are dispersed path areas in either pink for departures or yellow for arrivals. These areas show the possible locations where aircraft may fly and account for the possibility of different routing to avoid hazardous weather, for operational need, or for safety. When aircraft fly in these areas, it is typically due to a pilot receiving a compass heading from air traffic control. A vector is a compass heading assigned to an aircraft by an air traffic controller at NorCal TRACON or at an airport tower. The bullet points on the right side provide additional details about the procedures. Next, we'll take a look at each arrival and departure board for these airports.
Hello, my name is Than McLeod, and I'm the Airspace and Procedures Manager at FAA's Northern California TRACON, known as NCT or NorCal Approach. I've been actively involved in the procedure development within the NorCal airspace for the last 22 years. This board shows the Bay Area with San Francisco International's airspace in blue. This airspace, called Class Bravo, was redesigned in 2018 after the FAA conducted an environmental review per the National Environmental Policy Act. The redesign was done so that aircraft arriving to San Francisco can more fully utilize optimized profile descents, called OPDs. An OPD is where aircraft approach an airport using idle power on a continuous path instead of stair-stepping down. The OPD descent is programmed into the aircraft's flight management system that controls the lateral and vertical path, providing for a precise arrival using minimal flaps and other methods to slow down the aircraft. With the 2018 update to the airspace, these OPD procedures could be flown as they were designed. This provides for a smaller noise footprint, as well as associated reduction in fuel and lower carbon emissions. The 2018 update did not result in any changes to the existing procedures. The Diamond, Yosemite, and the Surfer procedures were designed to utilize OPDs as much as possible. It's important to note that air traffic controllers may direct aircraft off these procedures to avoid hazardous weather, for operational need, or for other safety concerns. For reference, the current arrival for procedures from the south and the east are shown in orange. While the Class B update was a select committee request, we view this as a great example of how continued collaboration can create a positive result for safety, efficiency, and the community.
Hello, my name is Melissa Holmes, and I am the Assistant General Manager at the FAA's Air Traffic Oakland District. This board shows the candle departure used at Oakland International Airport. It was designed for aircraft to initially depart to the north, then fly over the peninsula where they merge with the stick departures from San Francisco. Aircraft on these departures then fly to the port waypoint on their way to southern and eastern destinations. During periods of high traffic, or to provide the required separation between San Francisco and Oakland air traffic, candle departures may be vectored off the procedure. Aircraft that are vectored are given a different heading to fly than the published procedure. However, controllers will continue to use the candle departure as published whenever air traffic conditions allow. Select committee recommendations included a desire to have aircraft remain on the published procedure. The FAA and airlines also have a common interest in staying on the published procedure as much as possible. It's important to remember that an air traffic controller's primary duty is to provide a safe national airspace system. They will continue to use the candle departure as published when air traffic conditions allow. The graphic in the lower left-hand corner shows the existing color-coded radar tracks legend.
This board shows the sunny departure used at Oakland International Airport. Even prior to being published, this procedure has been used for many years to provide noise abatement during nighttime hours. Prior to the Sunny's publication, aircraft would be given a 120-degree heading by Oakland Tower to fly down the bay and then on to their destination. The procedure was officially published in 2017 so that it could be automated and sent to the aircraft's flight management system. During the hours of 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., this procedure will continue to be used as much as possible. The graphic in the lower left-hand corner shows existing color-coded radar tracks legend. This board shows two departures, the night used at San Francisco International Airport and hush used at Oakland International Airport. These procedures were designed for aircraft to fly at night for noise abatement. Currently, the FAA uses these procedures only for north and northeast destinations. In the future, the FAA will expand their use to include additional flights. Aircraft from both airports will depart and initially fly north over the bay. Once over the bay, aircraft with destinations to the west, south, or southeast will fly west over the Golden Gate Bridge to Gobb's Waypoint, then eastward back over the peninsula. Aircraft on the night or hush procedure that fly back over the peninsula will be at altitudes of at least 13,000 feet when they cross back over the land. We anticipate many aircraft will be higher than 13,000 feet. This conservative estimate was based on the understanding that we may need to hold aircraft down for arrival aircraft on the Bodega flight procedure. Currently, aircraft fly to the night or Rebus waypoint in the bay and then north onto one of the 4 departure routes to their destination. Aircraft from San Francisco and Oakland are merged into a single stream to fly over the bay, and they're not vectored off the procedure until Rebus, unless the safety situation requires that the aircraft be vectored. An air traffic controller's primary duty is to provide a safe national airspace system. The graphic in the lower left-hand corner shows the existing color-coded radar tracks legend.
This board shows flight tracks for aircraft arriving to SFO from the north on the published Bodega procedure, shown in blue. Aircraft on the Bodega arrival fly to a navigational waypoint north of SFO called Bricks, then are given compass headings by air traffic control. These compass headings guide aircraft down the peninsula to SFO. Aircraft flying on the Bodega are spaced at least 5 nautical miles nose to tail as required by federal regulations. Aircraft are lined up on the Bodega procedure many miles north of the airport. Increasing this spacing would affect other flights, delaying arrivals. An air traffic controller's primary duty is to provide a safe national airspace system. They will continue to send aircraft down the bay when separation standards are met. The graphic in the lower left-hand corner shows the existing color-coded radar tracks legend.
This flight procedure board shows flight tracks for aircraft arriving to San Francisco from the north on the Bodega flight procedure, shown in blue. Aircraft taken down the bay fly the Bodega arrival to a navigational waypoint just north of San Francisco, then are given compass headings by air traffic control. These headings guide the aircraft down the bay to land at San Francisco. These aircraft must be manually controlled because they're opposite direction and they conflict with other arrival traffic. There has to be enough space between the successive arrivals from the east and the south, and the bay will conflict with an Oakland arrival. Weather also affects our ability to use down the bay. If there is a marine layer or obscuration to visibility, the down the bay procedures are much more restricted. Current Northern California TRACON radar approach control noise abatement procedures state that aircraft should be routed down the bay to the maximum extent possible. But an air traffic controller's primary duty is to provide a safe and national airspace system. They will continue to send aircraft down the bay when separation standards can be met. The graphic in the lower left-hand corner shows the existing color-coded radar tracks legend.
Time-based flow management, or TBFM, is a tool that air traffic control uses to schedule and meter arriving aircraft. When TBFM is implemented at an airport, it is used for every published arrival procedure. It is designed for an airport, not used for one arrival stream. This board shows multiple published arrival procedures in SFO from the north, south, west, and east, including the Bodega, Pirate, Surfer, Yosemite, and Diamond. Aircraft on these arrivals are sequenced to land at SFO. In good weather, aircraft ultimately line up in two streams for landing on runways 28 left and 28 right. In poor weather, aircraft line up in one stream to land on one of the runways at a time. At SFO, TBFM is always available and activated when needed. Just like ground-based traffic, TBFM is used during periods of high traffic.
This board shows the Pirate arrival procedure used by aircraft arriving to San Francisco and Oakland that fly over the ocean. Prior to the Pirate, the only arrival available to aircraft flying in over the ocean required aircraft to be below 5,000 feet over the Woodside VOR. The Select Committee asked the FAA to design an arrival that followed the historic noise abatement procedure of crossing Woodside VOR at or above 8,000 feet. The Pirate arrival was designed as an optimum profile descent to provide both lateral and vertical guidance. As published, aircraft fly to the Pirate waypoint over the ocean, then to the ARG waypoint, which is located within 100 feet of the Woodside VOR. After crossing the ARG waypoint at 8,000 feet, aircraft are then given compass headings by air traffic control to land. Currently, the FAA is not using the Pirate arrival as an OPD. Today, aircraft on the procedure are descended to 10,000 feet by air traffic controllers. Controllers then issue vectors and altitude assignments to direct the aircraft to the final approach course. The graphic in the lower left-hand corner shows the existing color-coded radar tracks legend. This board shows the Bay Area with the BRICS arrival procedure for flights arriving from the north to San Jose International Airport. Aircraft fly this procedure to the BRICS waypoint, which is north of the airport. Controllers then give them compass headings to the final approach, or they are allowed to fly the entire procedure and are issued the RNAV approach. An RNAV procedure uses satellite navigation to provide a precise flight path. Aircraft on the BRICS procedure are procedurally separated from San Francisco Surfer arrivals, which are flying beneath them. The BRICS procedure was updated to provide improved separation between the Surfer arrivals to San Francisco and the BRICS arrivals to San Jose. The FAA briefed the San Jose Airport Commission in May 2021, and the procedure was implemented in June 2021. This board shows the path for the existing tiptoe arrival procedure used by aircraft arriving to San Francisco. This procedure is often flown from the Surfer arrival. Some aircraft may be vectored off the Surfer arrival and then vectored to the Shira waypoint and cleared for the tiptoe visual approach. As a reminder, a waypoint is a fixed navigational point in space that the aircraft fly to.
Aircraft fly it when safety, traffic, and weather allow pilots to use visual guidance to land. A request was made for the FAA to create what's called an RNAV visual approach to overlay the tiptoe. An RNAV visual approach is a flight path where the aircraft's flight management system helps the pilot to follow a visual track to landing. For an RNAV visual approach to be approved, FAA orders require that there be a compelling safety reason and no other practical instrument flight procedure options are available before developing an RNAV visual overlay approach. The FAA will continue to use the tiptoe as an arrival procedure for noise abatement when traffic and safety permit. The graphic in the lower left-hand corner shows the existing color-coded radar tracks legend.
The procedure shown on this board is the Windsor arrival to Oakland. The published procedure is used by aircraft arriving from the north. Aircraft fly to the Boise waypoint, then are given vectors to land by air traffic control, or they are allowed to fly the entire procedure and issued the RNAV approach. The Windsor was designed to be an RNAV arrival that could be programmed into an aircraft's flight management system. It is designed as an optimum profile descent, or OPD. The OPD descent is programmed into the aircraft's flight management system that controls the lateral and vertical path, providing for a precise arrival using minimal flaps and other methods to slow down an aircraft. Aircraft on this arrival need to be separated from aircraft flying to Napa Valley, as well as Bay Area departures. To accomplish this, air traffic controllers must actively manage these aircraft, providing altitude and speed and vector assignments. This active management of the flights provides the required safety separation and allowed the Windsor procedure to remain in its current location. The procedure shown on this board is a surfer arrival to San Francisco. This published procedure is used by aircraft arriving from the south. Aircraft fly this procedure to the Eddy waypoint and then are either given compass headings to the final approach or allowed to fly the entire procedure and issued the RNAV approach. It is designed as an optimum profile descent. With the update to the airspace, these OPD procedures could then be flown as they were designed. Here is a quick video on the proposed procedure and its status.
This animation shows arrival routes into San Francisco from the south. You can see both the conventional Big Sur route and the satellite-based route called Surfer. The primary change between the Big Sur and the Surfer was a shift in the flight path to the east. Following this change, the Select Committee recommended that arrivals into San Francisco from the south use the Big Sur ground track for a new next-gen procedure that incorporates the criteria contained in the second sub-recommendation. It is important to clarify that while the Select Committee used the term criteria, the FAA views these as Select Committee recommendations. The FAA must apply its own safety criteria to these recommendations. Following those safety and efficiency criteria, the FAA proposed the following changes to the current Surfer route. The proposed alternative would be for an aircraft to enter the local airspace and head toward the Waves waypoint. After Waves, aircraft on the proposed route would closely follow the historic Big Sur track to Boulder waypoint, then the final waypoint, Eddy. At the Boulder waypoint, aircraft would be at or above 8,000 feet above sea level to cross the Bricks arrival route into San Jose International Airport. At the Eddy waypoint, aircraft would be at 6,000 feet above sea level, which is the altitude at today's current Eddy waypoint. After the Eddy waypoint, based on traffic volume and weather, the FAA anticipates that approximately half of the aircraft would stay on the existing satellite-based approach procedure, These aircraft would continue to the side-by waypoint and then fly on their gradual near-idle descent throughout their approach into the airport. The other half of the aircraft would be vectored to the airport. This vectoring would spread out the flight tracks as controllers account for traffic, spacing, sequencing, and weather as they currently do today. The amended SURFR would involve changes to 2 existing waypoints. The Eddy waypoint would move approximately a quarter of a mile northwest to keep the SURFR separated from the BRICS arrival route for San Jose International Airport. The Menlo waypoint, which is still part of the current Big Sur, is not part of the current or the amended SURFR. Despite the FAA's very best effort and investment of significant resources, the constraints and challenges posed by the Northern California airspace and the need to meet FAA safety criteria did not allow for a procedure design that met every element of the Select Committee's recommendations. Furthermore, with heavy population densities under the Northern California airspace, designing an amended SURFR that flew over fewer people at higher altitudes posed a significant obstacle. At this point, the FAA cannot offer a procedure design to replace the current SURFR that both meets the FAA's safety criteria and the full intent of the Select Committee recommendations, which leads us to a position of keeping the current SURFR in place. In the future, if design criteria and technologies change, we would welcome the opportunity to work through the Northern California roundtables to consider new options for addressing the concerns of communities under the current SURFR.
Well, hello again. I am Raquel Griffin, the Regional Administrator for the FAA's Western Pacific region. And I want to thank you all for participating in our virtual public workshop. I will be the moderator for this community workshop. And first, I'd like to cover 3 procedural items before we start the question and answer session. First, if you're having technical issues connecting to the workshop, you can text our tech support number anytime during the workshop. The number was up before, it's 949-478-0253. Second, this workshop is scheduled for 2 hours. We have about 75 to 80 minutes time allotted for question and answer. And we have another workshop tomorrow, and we will cover the same topic, so you may attend that as well. Third, we are also live streaming on the FAA's Facebook Live feed. We are recording this workshop, and it will be available on our website after the workshop concludes. All right, let me introduce our panelists, starting with the FAA's Air Traffic Organization. We have Melissa Holmes, Assistant General Manager for the Oakland District Office, Fan McLeod, Manager for the Airspace and Procedures Planning and Requirements at NorCal TRACON, Joseph Burt, National Airspace Analytics Team Lead, Marina Landis, Environmental Protection Specialist. And then from San Francisco International Airport, we have Ivor Satiro, Airport Director, and Nupur Sinha, Acting Planning and Environmental Director. From Oakland International Airport, we have Craig Simon, Assistant Director, Port of Oakland, and Matt P. Davis, Airport Operations Manager. From San Jose International Airport, John Aitken, Airport Director, and Matthew Kazmierczak, Manager of Strategy and Policy. From the airlines, we have from Alaska Airlines, Lynette Craig, Flight Operations, Paul Harrison, Technical Pilot. From American Airlines, Eddie Angeles, Director of Government Affairs. From FedEx Express, Ann Bechdel, Managing Director for Regulatory Affairs. Scott Campbell, Project Engineering Specialist, and Jonathan Tree, Technical Pilot. From Southwest Airlines, Gary McMullen. From United Airlines, Kevin Kuhn. He's from the San Francisco and Western Region Air Traffic Manager. Paul Litke, Director of Surface Operations. From the Airline Pilots Association, Doug Willey, who's the chair of the Air Traffic Services Group. And before we start with a public Q&A, I wanted to see if any of our panelists would like to comment on what we shared in the beginning about the complexity of operating in the Bay Area. I think I might turn to one of our airlines. Kevin, would you like to speak to this from the airline perspective?
Yeah, from the airline perspective, unique perspective. I worked as an air traffic controller for various facilities throughout the Bay Area for 30 years. I now work for United in air traffic strategies. And the Bay Area is very important to us, especially San Francisco is one of our hubs. We started passenger service out of San Francisco in 1937 with the first flight from San Francisco to Los Angeles. San Francisco is now one of our 7 hubs. We fly to 29 international destinations pre-COVID and over 80 domestic destinations direct from San Francisco, with numerous other destinations through our other hubs. San Francisco is important because it's the gateway to Pacific, commerce. We fly a lot of business travelers to Asia, the Pacific. According to the San Francisco Business Times, we're the 3rd largest employer in San Francisco behind Salesforce and Wells Fargo. Our employees live in the community, work in the community, and we're very concerned about noise.
Very nice. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Let me ask a couple more questions because these are two that we often get asked. Who gets to decide what? So, first, we're often asked who gets to determine the flight schedules. Since Congress deregulated the airline industry in 1978, each passenger or cargo carrier makes their business decisions about a particular market. The FAA doesn't make those decisions. The FAA's main role is, for the purposes of tonight, determining the paths and managing the safe separation of aircraft. So I'd like to ask our airline panelists to speak to what drives the flight schedules, number of flights, and time that you fly. I think that maybe our cargo carrier may wish to speak to this one.
Sure, happy to talk, Raquel. And my name is Ann Bechdel, Managing Director for Regulatory Affairs with Fedex, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I think when you think of this in the context for Fedex and what it means, it's really monitoring the global supply chain and looking at our schedule and making the necessary adjustment based on the demands of that. And so when you think about it in the past context of the 18 months where we've been involved in COVID response, it's really keeping supply chains open to ensure that our communities and customers that we serve had access to critical PPE, necessary medical supplies, and of course now vaccine distribution. At the start of the pandemic, it was essential many of these supplies were coming from China to the United States to aid with our COVID response. And as the United States started to respond, we were offering those services back to the rest of the world that began to struggle with that next wave. So when you think about it that in that context, it's really the global supply chain that's driving those schedule reviews and changes to our operation.
That's really great. Thanks so much, Anne. Would any of the passenger airlines wish to speak from the passenger perspective? Looks like Lene.
Yeah, this is Lene with Alaska Airlines, and I think there's a lot of similarities between the passenger service as well, right? So we're really set up our schedules based on the demand. It's who wants to fly, what kinds of packages are we shipping as belly cargo, who's connecting from different smaller airports to larger airports. And what we've seen a lot, during COVID is a really dramatic drop in all demand. And so I think everyone saw not very many airplanes flying, except for a lot of moving of equipment or moving of supplies and food and other cargo. And as passenger traffic has come up, we've seen a big change too, because there's a lot more leisure travel happening right now because business travel hasn't opened up as much. And so it's really, the customer is ultimately driving when we operate our flights and then how we connect that to our partners and from smaller airports to bigger airports.
Thank you, Lene. Let me go to another one on the who decides what question. Our video explained the airspace and flight paths, but it may be helpful for us to explain kind of who decides where the planes go. So I'm going to start with our air traffic colleagues to speak to the role of the air traffic control team and the tower, at the tower and the TRACON. And then I will ask the pilots to weigh in on that as well. So let me turn it to the FAA folks first.
Okay, thank you, Raquel. So as a lot of our viewers probably know that there's visual flight rules and then there's instrument flight rules. And so how an aircraft may file and fly and the route of flight they take does depend on under what rules they're flying. And a pilot may file a route of flight under instrument flight rules, but air traffic will determine and often override what they want to do. And the route of flight that we assign for those instrument flights depends on the other airports, the other traffic in the area. And a departure, for example, a departure out of the Bay Area needs to tie into an arrival route into the airspace that they're going into. So if you're going from the Bay Area to Los Angeles, that departure route needs to tie into a Los Angeles area arrival route. And so we have to manipulate those aircraft and put them on a route that safely separates them from the other airports and aircraft and also ties into their destination. We also have to decide when an aircraft departs an airport, if we can let them continue on that route. And sometimes we can't do that because there might be a special event, there might be one of those visual flight rule aircraft. The airspace is used by a lot of different entities, including law enforcement and even sporting arenas will have use of airspace. And so there are other factors that will determine if we have to take them off of a published procedure.
Thank you, Fan. And I think then let me go to the pilots, because there is a pilot in command position, and we'd like, I think, Doug, you're going to speak to that a little bit.
Sure, Raquel. Thanks for having me today. Really appreciate being here. The Airline Pilots Association represents over 35 airlines and 59,000 pilots in the United States and Canada. So the pilot in command position is that one pilot on the aircraft that is ultimately responsible for the safety of that flight. With that privilege comes much more responsibility, and I think my colleagues on the panel would agree, than does any of the privileges. It doesn't mean we can just do what we want. Pretty much what it means is we have to follow all the rules and regulations as necessary, unless there is some overriding safety or emergency reason that we can't. And so as Than pointed out, there's different flight rules. The predominance of flight rules that the airlines are flying are the instrument flight rules. There are some very minimal opportunities to do visual flight rules, and they're very restricted. And every carrier has their own specifications that spell out what they can and can't do. But as a pilot in command, the predominance of what we do is we are going to maintain a safe operation. We're going to be efficient on behalf of our airlines. And as pretty much we're going to follow what air traffic control needs us to do, because it adds to the efficiency not only of the system, but our particular flight. And those are the overruling issues that we follow. But again, safety absolutely is number one in that. So I hope that gives some information for those who aren't familiar with the pilot in command position.
Thanks so much, Doug. Okay, I think with that as a little bit more of a background, let's go ahead and start with the first question. Let's see here. Why isn't the FAA moving Surfer? What conditions were you not able to meet? I'm going to start with what the Select Committee recommended, which is that arrivals into SFO from the south use the Big Sur ground track for a new next-gen procedure that incorporates 9 criteria. So I think you may have heard that in the video earlier. We want to know that the recommendation to move Surfer was the only recommendation that actually was not unanimous. And as the video stated, the FAA cannot design routes according to community criteria. So we take the community recommendations, the intent of the request of the recommendation, but we have to design to the safety criteria. And we worked really hard, again, as noted, to meet the Select Committee's conditions, but we could not meet all 9. I think I'm going to turn to my colleague, Joe Burt, to kind of speak to the specifics of the conditions that we were not able to meet in the design process.
Yes, Raquel,
Joe?
thank you. Yeah, so as Raquel said, we weren't able to meet a lot of the 9 criteria or recommendations that the select committee came up with. So one of the first ones we were not able to meet is overfly fewer people crossing the Monterey Bay. And then they wanted us to cross at or above 12,500. Under current criteria, we could only cross between 10,000 and 15,000. So we could not ensure that aircraft would be 12,500 feet above. So that's the first one that we could not meet. The second one, again, was kind of the same thing, crossing between crossing Menlo Waypoint at or above 5,000 feet. Menlo is no longer on the procedure. Eddy is now on the procedure. Eddy is 6,000 feet, but then we can't ensure that they would cross over the Menlo area at or above 5,000 feet. We couldn't ensure that they would be at an idle throttle, and we couldn't ensure that all the way to the Heman Waypoint as the select committee asked us to do. All these things were looked at hard. We got minds together, but based on current safety or developing criteria, we were not able to meet those main requirements moving forward with Surfer.
Thanks, Joe. We'll probably have more questions on that, but for now, I think hopefully that was, that got into the detail that folks are interested in. Let's see, next question. The FAA created the problem with the Surfer, and now it's just washing its hands and running away. Is there any circumstance under which the FAA would try again to find a solution? So we very much understand your frustration. We are briefing you today because we are taking community concerns very seriously. The FAA has been working very diligently for years to try to meet the Select Committee's recommendations, starting with engaging with the Select Committee in 2016. So we have what we've come up with, the amended Surfer. That's what we briefed today. That's the best we can offer at the stage. But we will continue to work with the roundtables. Should you submit a new consensus request that may have more flexibility? Alternatively, as we've said, safety criteria and technologies change. So there may be opportunities to readdress this issue as well. Okay, hopefully that answers that question. Let's see, let's go to the next one. Okay, looks like this is another Surfer question. What took so long to get to this point on Surfer? So I'll start again. One of the points that we have tried to make today, and I think you hopefully heard, is that we did, work for years to try to figure out what we can do to meet the recommendations, but despite our best efforts, sometimes we just are not able to deliver what the communities want because of our safety criteria, because of our core mandate, which is safety. So in the case of Surfer, I think as you heard, we designed the Class B airspace in 2018. And at the same time, we were running a design work group for Surfer in 2018 as well. I'm gonna turn to Than to speak a little bit to the work that we did in 2018 and subsequently.
So thank you. And you really did kind of sum it up, Raquel. The work group did meet multiple times in 2018, and they were simultaneously meeting on the redesign for the Class Bravo. We had to get the Class Bravo redesign work done first. We needed to be able to, by regulation, we needed to be able to design procedures that were contained in the Class Bravo. We couldn't create new procedures that took aircraft out of the Class Bravo. So that work was being done at the same time. When we met and we tried to create a surfer that overlaid the Big Sur, the problem with that really became, as Joe mentioned and Raquel, we couldn't meet all the criteria. And part of that is because the Big Sur, where the Big Sur track is, it does conflict with other aircraft. And so as you saw in the video, the best we could do was to bring it in where it currently is and then bend over at waves. And that's because the Big Sur isn't an idle descent. It's not a descend via, it's not an OPD. We stair step those aircraft down because they do conflict with other aircraft. And so the only way to develop a procedure that actually could be an idle descent was to move it away from the conflicts. And we continued to try, we looked at, but everything has a ripple effect. You just can't build something in isolation. When we looked at, okay, well, if we did this, could we move that? Well, could we move that? And it pretty soon we were butted up against military airspace. We did try multiple times to meet all of the criteria and we just couldn't do it.
Thanks, Van. I think also with respect to timing, I wanted to note a couple of external, I'd say significant external circumstances that played a role. In December of 2018, we did have a 5-week government funding lapse. And as you might imagine, the backlog that comes from something like that doesn't equate to 5 weeks, right? It's many more months. We were able to, as Van noted, have a second working group in June of 2019. And subsequently, we then, the thing that we worked on, because we knew that the communities were really very keen on having this change, is to work it to the point where we could, even though we knew that we couldn't meet all of the recommendations, that we at least could come up with something that did the best that we could and could be technically implemented. And so that process, as you know, we've talked about the design process and all of the steps that it takes, and that takes time. And then subsequently, we were prepared to brief it in 2020, but again, external circumstances happened between COVID, Northern California wildfires, and then the community roundtable schedules. So literally all of that happened. And so here we are today. So I think that sort of sums up our efforts on SURFR. Okay, let's see. I will go to the next question. Okay, here we go. I want to participate in designing the procedures at my airport. So I get another question for me. So I want to note that your voices are heard in the process through the airports who participate in the work group, as well as through our community engagement officers. As I think you hopefully have seen in their engagement in the roundtables, they are very well aware of the community concerns. And in addition to their participation in the roundtables, they communicate with the airports, and they also are well aware of the concerns through our noise portal or our noise complaint initiative. Now, with respect to the actual work group, as you might imagine, this is a very technical team. Changes to the airspace have to be addressed by a team of technical experts. They follow some very specific requirements. So I think from our perspective, we are taking into account the community concerns in the process. I think that's about all I can say here. I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to weigh in on this, so I will move on to the next question. Okay, let's see. Maybe next one I won't have to answer. Can the FAA clarify what process exists, if any, to audit the content of an environmental review when there is material evidence that assumptions or statements were either subjective, incorrect, inconsistent, that methods used were invalid, or that the FAA did not seek answers to critical questions. If so, describe the audit process and possible outcomes. This sounds like a Marina question, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Marina.
You're on mute. Forgot technology works. Thank you, Raquel, for the question. I think I can help with that. It sounds like, in listening to the question that you brought forward, it sounds like it's a little bit of a perception. And I'd like to explain that when the FAA has a proposed project, for example, maybe there's a proposed change to an aircraft flight procedure or a proposed change to a type of airspace, the FAA will complete an environmental review, and that's done in accordance with the National Environmental Policy Act. Now, the FAA complies with the National Environmental Policy Act, as well as other special purpose laws, in accordance with our internal guidance and policies and procedures to assess what potential environmental impacts there may be. And the FAA looks at actually 14 different environmental impact categories to determine whether or not we will have an adverse effect. And noise is one of those 14 impact categories.
Thank you, Marina. Let's go to the next question here. What are you going to do with the comments the public provides at today's meeting? So today's meeting is an informational workshop. This is an opportunity for you to ask our distinguished panel of experts questions about the Northern California airspace and our operations. We are thinking that the input that we're hearing on the changes that we're discussing today, perhaps, those comments would get kind of sent to us through the community roundtables and working groups. Just really, to us, this is a complement of what we're hearing from your communities through the roundtables. Let's see. Okay. All right. How do you create procedures? Who asks for them? Is it the airlines? Is it the airports? Or is it the FAA? Let me see. So I think because actually there's lots of folks who can comment on that, I'll go ahead and start with our air traffic team again, just because this is something that obviously most of the procedure changes actually come from the FAA internally. So I'll start there, and then I'll look to our airlines and airports if they'd like to weigh in on that.
Hi, Raquel. I'll take the first part of that question. And I'd actually like to answer the second half first. So who asks for procedures? Several different entities can ask for procedures. As you said, the FAA creates lots of procedures, but airlines can ask for them, airports could ask for them, and community groups can ask for them as well. If it's an RNAV or next gen procedure, then we put a work group together. And on that work group, we have a variety of stakeholders, including controllers, procedural experts from our service center, and then also pilots who all help ensure that the procedure is designed safely and efficiently. So the work group also considers the current airspace configurations and existing routes, and then they build around those constraints. When they're putting the draft procedure together, they're using the most current safety criteria, and we do have experts that make sure that we're using the most current procedures, the most current criteria, and that we're applying them correctly. And then they also factor in other airports and terrain. So once the draft design is put together, it goes through several different review processes, which include an environmental review and community input. So that's what it looks like from the FAA side, if you might get input from some of the other folks as well.
Yes, sure. I know that our colleagues in the airline world and certainly in the airport world have had their roles. So I'm actually trying to look, see if anybody would like to speak to that at all. Gary?
Yes, Raquel, I can help, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to participate with this group tonight. Building procedures in the safest and most efficient system in the world is a very difficult and very complex issue. Our role lies in supporting the FAA and designing procedures that are flyable. And what I mean by that is we all fly airplanes that are highly computerized today. We fly with a computer that's called the flight management computer and the autopilot that gives us very specific information to fly these procedures. That computer is based on what the aircraft capability is. In other words, how fast can it climb? How fast can it descend? And it's very limited in its ability to descend to an altitude and slow down. And it also has limits in its ability to climb to certain altitudes. So we're limited by physics, aircraft capability, which is in that flight management computer. So what our role is we support the FAA with the criteria or the rules that they use to build procedures and ensure that each aircraft can safely fly those. Many times when we receive requests from many different areas, I can assure this group that everybody in the work groups evaluates each one of those requests. Many of those are just really to a point where the aircraft can't fly them. And it really puts the pilot into a situation where we can't manage the aircraft safely. And that means that air traffic then has to do something with us to be able to safely fly the aircraft. It's all physics. We can only descend so fast. We can only slow down so fast. And when we're going upwards of 300 to 400 miles per hour, things happen quickly. So our role in this process is simply to support the FAA, ensure that each aircraft that we fly can fly these procedures safely and not cause pilots or air traffic controllers problems when we're assigned to fly them. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. It's always helpful to get your perspective. Let's see, looks like John may have something to add.
Hello, Raquel. Hello, everyone. It's very difficult to talk after Gary McMullen because he explains things extremely well. But it's a pleasure to be here tonight to speak with all of you. I would like to add that we as operators in support of the FAA really do our very best to optimize safety and to optimize the performance of the aircraft. And we really appreciate opportunities where we can save fuel, and saving fuel is getting up to our cruising altitudes as soon as possible and then descending on OPDs, preferably at idle power. But there are many constraints that the FAA deals with, particularly with the complex airspace that we have with 3 airports in the Northern California Bay Area. But we do support the FAA, and we really enjoy the relationship that we have with the community and also with the FAA to put safety first, and then efficiency follows naturally. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John. I think, so we have some airlines who've spoken. I believe Matt Davis, are you off mute? And does that mean you would like to speak to this?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time getting that hand up there, so thanks, Raquel. Appreciate it. From the airportt's perspective, it really speaks to what Raquel did earlier about the relationship the airport has with the community groups, and we really rely on our forum that we meet with quarterly and multiple subcommittees that we meet with between the forum to really work with and help us kind of vet requests for different procedures, really to identify those procedures that are the most important for the community. And the most important to push forward to the FAA. And working with that committee, what we then do is we would again look at some of the requests together. We would decide some possible sort of beneficial outcomes, what we might be looking for, And that information would then be submitted to the FAA through the IFP gateways through a computerized process. But again, it really relies on the community groups to really help us inform us. And our forum is representative of multiple communities around the airport to guide us and really help us, push forward those procedures we think are the most, like I said, beneficial. And then the FAA will come back to us subsequently and then work with us, hopefully, and the community groups on, what was specifically being asked for, what criteria may be possible, what might be possible given current criteria, what may not be possible. And that really starts the two-way engagement process. And so really is a kind of a long process, to move things forward, but very prescriptive and we move it forward.
Hey, thanks so much for that engagement from a number of you. That's really great. Look, Marina, I see you're on mute. I wasn't sure do you have something else to add? Nope. Okay. All right, great. This is quite the juggling job here, making sure I'm looking at the screen and seeing the questions. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Okay, so this says, why did the FAA implement pirate? We never asked for it. I am going to ask Fan, I think, to answer this question.
Okay, thank you. So actually the FAA was asked by the Select Committee to revise the Woodside VOR Oceanic Tailored Arrival. And they asked us to revise that to honor the existing noise abatement procedure where we cross Woodside VOR at 8,000. And the tailored arrival, it was an idle descent. It was pre-OPD, but it was an idle descent arrival that could only be used by a select number of aircraft. And the aircraft that did fly that arrival, they would cross the Woodside VOR typically below 5,000 feet. And more of the aircraft that weren't on the tailored arrival, they were manually descended by Oakland Center air traffic controllers. They would stair step them down to cross pirate to be level at 10,000 feet. And then they gave those aircraft to NorCal Approach, and NorCal Approach would manually descend them and vector them to the final approach course at San Francisco. So after we received the request to revise the tailored arrival, we created the pirate arrival that could be flown by almost all the aircraft landing in San Francisco, and it did honor the noise abatement procedure to cross Woodside VOR at 8,000 feet.
All right, thanks so much, Van. Let's move on to the next question here. Why isn't the FAA doing something about these flight paths that are torturing Bay Area residents? So I'm going to start with this, but I actually feel like, as I think I mentioned earlier, because aviation is really something in which we have lots of stakeholders involved, and there's our industry stakeholders also have their roles. I'd like to hear from them as well, but let me start from the FAA. Again, as we've said, the FAA takes community concerns very seriously. We have been working extensively with the Bay Area communities through the roundtables and through the Select Committee. But again, as you saw earlier, we have this very complex system. So it's, I'm going to ask maybe Melissa to just talk a little bit more about like the safety issues and concerns again on how challenging it is for us to deal with, getting aircraft in and out of these airports in this small airspace. And then I will turn over to the airlines and airports so they can talk a little bit about what they're doing to address community concerns. So Melissa?
Yeah, thanks, Raquel. And I do want to echo what you said. The Northern California airspace is very busy and complex. I do understand the frustration. I'm a Bay Area resident as well, and so I see the airplanes as well. However, my primary job and the primary job of every air traffic controller is to ensure the safety of every aircraft in our airspace. So as we are looking at airspace and different routes, we have to keep aircraft on many different routes in our airspace to make sure that they stay safely separated from each other. And when you look at that, having aircraft safely separated, with other constraints that we've talked about earlier, congested airspace, there's very little room for us to make changes to aircraft routes that don't just move flights from one community to another, which can also be problematic. So it's a very fine balancing act.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. I mean, I think our video earlier showed the fact that we're talking about 6 million people in the area, over 150 airports, 3 major airports. So there are a lot of factors that really make it challenging to address that issue. But let me go to some airports so that they can talk a little bit about what they're doing to address community concerns, because I know that they're very actively involved in this area as well. Let me see. It's a little bit of a challenge to make sure I'm seeing all the speakers. Anybody? Ivar?
Sure, Raquel, thank you. And we see our role as advocate for the community. And as Matt talked about, looking at procedures that would have community benefit as part of the role we play, and working with the stakeholders in the FAA to look at real solutions like that. I think some things we're doing around SFO, particularly around the residents of the peninsula, I think our objective is to find solutions for all parts of the peninsula because they experience different impacts. San Francisco, Brisbane, basically north of the airport experiences most of the time impacts from departures and turns over the peninsula. In Millbrae, Burlingame, Hillsborough, they experience backblast, they experience APU runs, maintenance runs, things like that, that have a noise component, a significant noise component. And then for the South Bay, so much is around the arrivals. And so we are looking for opportunities. We think night hush is a great opportunity, and trialing that in the hours of 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. and hopefully that can be expanded. And working through solutions like the agreement with the FAA to require the turn all the way out to Gobs. And I think with the advocacy of Kathleen Wentworth from Jackie Spears' office, that was a great moment and a success, I think, to get to that point with that procedure. And supporting backblast, it's an important issue for Millbrae. We hear from the mayor of Millbrae quite frequently, and supporting studies and really helping characterize that impact to the residents. It's not uncharted territory, but it's not well-defined territory. And then, for the residents of the South Bay, the investment in GBAS, we see that as, we're hopeful that it has potential with the design of some of the more esoteric, innovative arrival procedures. So we're looking to play a role to support all the communities where we can find solutions.
Thanks, Ivar. Newport, go ahead.
I was going to add one more thing. We have taken a big step to make sure that our noise insulation program is very active, and we look to delivering homes as quickly as possible. And we have doubled down on providing more of that outreach, issue of getting respondents to apply for the program and stay on it. We try to cover those issues very robustly, and we've really done a huge outreach to the community to make that also a big addition to our offerings.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ivar and Nupur. I do want to make sure that we get to more questions, but Eddie, I think I saw you unmute. Is that right?
Yeah, Raquel, from an airline perspective, I just do want to make a comment as it relates to what we're doing. And more specifically, in terms of the noise aspect of it, is the investment that the airlines, I think all the airlines that are here, making investment in the equipment in terms of making the aircraft actually quieter. And as innovation would have you be developed, Jeff Bezos went up and went up to space today, and Bronson went up to space a week back. As technology evolves, clearly in terms of aircraft development and quieter engines and mechanisms are being obviously put in place that are less in terms of mission and commitment towards the environment. I believe the airlines, certainly American Airlines, is committed to that. And just want to point out the fact that the airlines, I think all the airlines are committed to making sure that we are making those types of investment in our equipment in terms of quieter airplanes.
Great, thanks very much, Eddie. Craig, I think I see you unmuted.
I did. Thank you, Raquel. I just wanted to take a minute and kind of reiterate what IVAR and SFO is doing is very similar to what we're doing over at Oakland. Matt kind of alluded to the different committees. We've got 3 committees that are very active. We meet on a quarterly basis to discuss issues, and the FAA has been involved in those meetings with us, so we certainly appreciate that. It's a real good opportunity for the community to exchange information, provide a great opportunity for them to get in front of the FAA and talk about some of their issues and concerns. We've also recently upgraded our noise monitoring software with our vendor Enviro Suites, which will include an upgraded noise monitoring system, as well as some very, very neat enhancements to the website, which will provide users kind of more information about the noise program and aircraft operations in and around the Bay Area.
Thank you so much, Craig. I think I better move on to the next question. Let's see here. Okay, the question is, why can't the night procedure be used before 1 a.m., especially during COVID when flight schedules have been drastically reduced? There shouldn't be any flights on the stick procedure. So I'm going to turn over to Than to answer this question.
Okay, thank you. So the night and the hush departure procedures, they're currently used every evening starting around 9:30 p.m. And it is an actual automation change that's in the system, and the flight plans are then texted or sent automatically to the airplanes. And the night hush proposal, that will add the southbound departures, and it will increase the number of aircraft that are merged into that single stream. So historically, when our demand for a single stream departure reaches 30 departures in 1 hour, we start seeing delays of more than 15 minutes. And with only one departure route, that it gets very difficult to get out of those delays once you've gotten into them. It can take 4 to 5 hours to get actually back on schedule. And we also don't want this noise abatement procedure to turn into a problem for another community such as Millbrae, like Ivar mentioned. We don't want aircraft backed up on the taxiway and sitting there for hours or even more than 15 minutes. I mean, that starts to cause its own noise problem. So we did look at the data, and we did go back to 2019, and we saw that we could safely say that between the hours of 1 and 5, that we pretty much guarantee that could use this procedure. And when the traffic volumes for 2019 and 18 were reviewed, that was really the only time that we could promise. But like Ivar said, we don't know what traffic will look like in the future. We do expect it to pick back up. We do expect it to reach back to our pre-COVID numbers, though. So we don't want to prematurely make a promise that we won't be able to keep.
Thanks a lot, Than. I'm seeing a number of questions having to do with this meeting specifically, so let me go through them real quick here. Can you make questions available to everyone at or following the meeting so there's transparency of the questions being asked by the public? We are recording this meeting. It's going to be posted on the FAA Community Engagement website. The Q&A segment will be included there. Will the FAA answer questions that were submitted at the time of registration? So we are trying to address as many questions as possible. If you feel that your questions remain unanswered, you could follow up through your respective roundtable. Alternatively, perhaps tomorrow, we do have another meeting or another workshop tomorrow, and hopefully we can address those questions then. Let's see, I think those were the 2 questions on the meeting and the questions. Okay, next one. Did the FAA consult with the Santa Clara, Santa Cruz Roundtable, congressional representatives, or others on the SURFR proposal? If so, please disclose the content and dates of communications. So we certainly provided periodic updates to the congressional offices, and we explained what we were and weren't able to do despite our best efforts. I mean, really, we've conveyed to you all what we have shared in those meetings. So I don't think there's anything else we could add to that. Let's see here. Is there a timetable for the agenda items in this presentation? Okay, that's a good question. I guess we don't really have one at the moment. What we can do is when we publish this briefing, we can kind of pin each topic so that if there's folks who want to quickly access a particular topic, it'll be easier to find it in the website. Another question. Okay, so this one says, with Millbrae, we get all the departure noise, and the FAA directs a significant number of flyovers also over Millbrae. Then in reverse flow, we get all landings and takeoffs over us at hundreds of feet. Number of flights pre-COVID were growing for each day and more from 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. and they are bigger, heavier, making even more noise. Why can you allow this, making living in Millbrae like living in a sound tunnel all the time, COVID giving us a break, and sometimes a decent night's sleep? If we are stuck with low frequency backblast noise, then we should not be subjected to any additional sources of noise. Well, there's a lot in that question, and I'm wondering, maybe I'm hoping other folks from the panel can help that. But I think one thing that we can certainly say is that for safety reasons, we have to keep the aircraft on the many different routes, and they have to be safely separated from one another. There's just not a lot of space to put them on. Let me see if anybody else would like to speak to that question. Feel like we just, I don't know, it is a challenge. I feel like that is part of the challenge that we face. Is sometimes for some communities, it really, there's just a lot happening around certain communities. Let's see, I'm not seeing any other hands up, so I'm going to go on to the next question. Okay, are Big Sur surfer tracks, okay, Big Sur / surfer tracks, identical from Eddy to the Bay? Yes or no? Similar does not mean identical. Different tracks mean the FAA is shifting noise. I think, Joe, can you answer that question? Or maybe Fan, in terms of?
Yeah, I think I can, Raquel, and it's a pretty easy answer. The answer is no, they are not identical. Eddy is not on the Big Sur procedure, so that alone makes it different. Menlo is actually the termination point for the Big Sur procedure. I don't know, Dan, did you have anything to add?
No, that's it. And the fixed side by is, about a quarter mile from Eddy, and that's on the approaches that tie into the surfer. But no, the tracks are not the same.
Thanks, Fan, and thanks, Joe. Next question. Is Bodega the same as the Point Reyes approach? Melissa, can you answer that question?
Yeah, and this is another pretty quick answer, no. The Point Reyes arrival is a conventional arrival and the Bodega is an optimum profile descent. So they are two different arrival procedures into San Francisco.
Great, thank you. And I think those are really good clarifying questions, right? I think this is really good for the communities to be able to ask those questions and get them answered immediately. Okay, one question about, could I have copies of the slides being shown? They are not clearly visible with my slow internet speeds. So first of all, we are recording this meeting, but I understand if it's not easily visible. Our boards are already on our website. And I'm going to look to Marina to confirm that. I believe that is the case. So if you are interested in just looking at the boards themselves, they are already available on the community engagement website. And again, all of this is going to be recorded and we will post it. Next question. I bought my house in Soquel. I don't know how to pronounce that, SoCal, pre-surfer. It was a wonderfully peaceful place to live. Then the jets started flying over with their air brakes and loud engines. It is an absolute nightmare and has made the area unbearable. The Big Sur legacy route worked and disrupt our lives. The statement that returning to the Big Sur route is a bold-faced lie. Switch it back now. So I just want to make sure I am understanding the question, but I think what I'll say sort of again, where we are with respect to Surfer. So the select committee recommended that we create a satellite-based overlay over the legacy Big Sur ground track. There were 9 criteria that came with that recommendation. We were not able to meet those criteria. And, you know, from our understanding, the communities and the select committee worked really hard to come up with those recommendations. And so we certainly were respecting all of those conditions, but we were not able to make them. And I think you heard Joe speak to the specific ones that we were unable to because of safety criteria. So I think that I'll kind of end that response there and see if there's anything else. I don't know, Joe, if you want to speak a little bit more, whether you can, you know, whether you want to elaborate on some of the points that you made earlier.
Yeah, so just, I think the big thing to stress here is Big Sur is a conventional procedure. And as Stan explained earlier, we have to step aircraft down on that procedure for separation, right? So that means it has controller interaction in order to fly that procedure. Where the Surfer, we don't have that problem. With the current Surfer, everything is all automated. The controllers know what's going to happen. It's predictable. When we have to go to the Big Sur, then like Than explained, we have to step aircraft down. We have to actually ensure separation is happening. That's one of the big differences right now. So because we were mandated by Congress to implement or to, you know, modernize the national airspace system, this is a result of that. We have to put in PBM procedures, which are more accurate, more predictable procedures. Again, we weren't able to meet the crossing restriction of the Monterey Bay, which was a request to be at or above 12,500. We have to be there between 10 and 15,000. So we weren't able to meet that. The Menlo Waypoint, we addressed that as well, right? Not part of the procedure anymore. It's now EDI. And then if they're staying on an RMP or an RNAV procedure, they would go to side-by. Again, that we can't ensure that that's going to be idle power all the way, because as Stan explained and the video explained, sometimes we have to check for aircraft off the procedure. Sometimes the controller has to intervene to provide additional separation to sequence or whatever the situation is going on. So those are the main reasons why we are leaving Surfer where it's at.
Okay, Joe, thank you. There may be, I think there's probably, yeah, I'm seeing more questions on Surfer. So but first let me go to the next one. If BRICS 3 was actually implemented in June of 2021, then why are flights into SJC mostly unchanged in altitude and location and thus noise to residents? I think that Joe.
That's me. That's me again. So yes, so we did implement changes in June of 2021. However, the majority of the change, which was safety related, would not be visible with the normal person. We had to change the minimum en route altitude, which is a minimum altitude that the pilot sees on the chart that they can descend to. So we had to change that. The chart prior to June of 2021 showed after BRICS it going as low as 7,000. But what was happening is pilots were flying the procedure, not hearing anything from air traffic, looking at the chart and then determining they could descend down to 7,000 safely. So because of that safety issue, we had to change it. And what we changed it to, I believe, was 12,000 feet. So we removed the 7,000 feet and moved it back up to 12,000 for the minimum en route altitude. Then the other change was we moved Gilna Waypoint, I want to say it's 1.2 miles to the southwest. And we did that to provide additional separation with the surfer procedure. And it also provides a little more flexibility with the air traffic control side of the house as well. So those changes did go in. Majority of the people, especially if you're on the underneath the star bricks, you're probably not going to experience a lot of change from what currently happens today.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, next question. Why did the FAA lie to us that moving back to Big Sur was feasible and that we should expect it to return in 12 to 18 months back in June 2019? We demand the FAA keep its word and return the path immediately. So again, we truly understand the frustration and sort of the position where we are now with respect to the current surfer. I think we've already conveyed the time and energy that we all spent to try to find a solution to meet all of the conditions that were in the recommendations. I also think that we have always said that we will design our procedures according to safety criteria. And so, you know, we understand that there are things that communities want, but we aren't, if, you know, our job is to make sure that if you want us to design a procedure, we have to make sure it's safe first. And so I think really that's probably the main reason. Oftentimes we go into this process with general kind of a general sense that we are able to do something. And yet once we kind of do all the work that we're not necessarily able to do it. And, you know, really, I think the FAA did not want to immediately say no. We wanted to do a little bit more homework, but that's really where we are. We really worked hard and unfortunately could not meet all of the criteria. Let's see, let's move on to the next question. When and why are flights vectored from OPD waypoints? I think maybe Melissa spoke to this a little bit.
Sure, I can take it, Raquel. So while our preference is for aircraft to stay on the procedures, there are really two times when we would vector aircraft off procedures. One of those times is for spacing. You saw on several of the boards that we have flight paths coming in from different directions that we have to blend into one flight path going to an airport. Arrivals from San Francisco come from 4 different directions, and we have to get them all lined up so that they can all safely land at the airport. We give aircraft vectors to make sure that they are safely separated from each other while we're blending those streams of aircraft. The other time that we'll issue vectors is for safety reasons. If a controller sees that 2 aircraft will be a conflict in the future, they will issue a vector to one or possibly both aircraft to ensure that they are separated and stay separated from each other. And this applies to arrivals, departures, and even overflights. So those would be the reasons that we would vector them off, aircraft off OPDs. Raquel.
Thank you very much. Next question is about Windsor. How can Windsor be considered an OPD when it flies low over the East Bay hills and plains that are always under power and even at night? Planes do not fly quietly, especially not Fedex. I guess with respect to the Windsor procedure, Fan or Melissa, will you speak to that?
I'll speak to that. So the Windsor is an OPD, and the aircraft routinely get to do an idle descent from above 25,000 feet down to approximately 7,000 feet. But you can kind of see on the inset, the smaller graphic that's on the screen right now, the Windsor does go does conflict with the departures out of San Francisco and Oakland that are going to the northeast. So we typically have to, by the time we're closer to the airport and into the terminal environment, we didn't show the Oakland arrivals as much as we did the San Francisco arrivals, but we have the same thing going on Oakland as we do at San Fran. We have the Oaks arrival coming in from the east. We have an Emzo arrival coming in from the south. We have the Windsor arrival coming from the north. And the Pirate arrival from the Oceanic also serves Oakland. And so the controllers, just like at San Francisco, are having to blend those arrivals together into one stream. And Oakland typically only has one runway that these aircraft are landing on. And so that Windsor arrival, there will be departure traffic that we need to get underneath, and then have these other streams that we have to move in. So by the time that we're that close to the airport, a lot of the OPDs are being manually controlled to vector for safety and spacing and all the things that Melissa just talked about.
Very good. Thank you, Than. And again, we understand some of the frustration when it comes to the noise. Let me, I have a lot of questions I'm trying to keep track of here. So I asked the Windsor question. Before I move on, just want to make sure that I haven't missed anybody who might want to speak to that. Okay, and let me know if you want to weigh in again later. Let me go to the next question then. I think this is actually similar to the one we heard before. Why has the BRICS arrival not changed altitude levels over my mountain home since the procedure was changed in June of 2021? Joe, I'm going to turn to you again because you answered the question about BRICS before.
Yep, exactly. Thank you, Raquel. So again, like I mentioned, the change to BRICS, the main change was the minimum en route altitude, which is more of a pilot thing when they're looking at the plate. So we raised that up from 7,000 to 12,000. So if you're anywhere between BRICS and Gilna, probably maybe 2 miles north of Gilna, you probably are not going to see any difference whatsoever. It's going to be just like it is today. They're going to be vectored just the same as they were, before June. But that's not going to change. Where you're probably going to see the change is when you're closer to Gilna, or if they're doing the actual RNAV RMPs into San Jose, those have shifted as well, slightly southwest with the changes. But the main change that we made for the safety issue was the MEA, and normal people on the ground aren't going to notice that change at all.
Joe, did you use the term MVA?
Minimum en route altitude,
Oh,
MEA.
Yes,
Yes,
there we go.
Sorry, got me.
Just want to make sure. Okay, so let's see, another question. A320s flying in Europe are not certified as airworthy unless they have special metal parts on their wings to prevent the loud whiny prevent the loud whiny noise that the A320s have in the United States. Why doesn't the USA require these same vortex metal parts to be airworthy in the USA? It would reduce the noise a lot. So first of all, if the question is about airworthiness in the USA, we probably wouldn't have quite the aircraft cert folks who would be the ones who speak to that question. So to some extent, I feel like that's a question that we probably can't necessarily answer in its entirety, but it may be possible if the air carriers could talk a little bit about their investment. I know there was a little bit of conversation on that in terms of how you make your selection for your fleet to address noise concerns. Would anybody want to speak to that? And again, I just have to look at the screen to find out.
Raquel,
Kevin, is that? Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that. I understand the question. And, one of the things that came out of the San Francisco Roundtable is the request for the trim tabs. I know United has made significant investment on putting the trim tabs on most of our Airbus fleet. I don't know the percentages right now, but we have invested in that. The thing, we've invested a lot in more efficient aircraft, quieter aircraft, and we continue to do that because we are very concerned with the noise in the area. We participate in the roundtable. We've been recognized by the director's office and awarded for our participation for doing things like the trim tab, the more efficient aircraft. So we do listen and we do take it seriously.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Anybody else from our air carriers? I just have to keep scrolling just to make sure I'm not missing anybody.
I can comment on that a little bit from Alaska Airlines too. I mean, we've had a mixed fleet for several years now, both Boeing and Airbus aircraft for our mainline flights. And so our Airbus fleet was mixed. Some had the vortex, the trim tabs, vortex generators on them. Some did not. And I know that different airports and roundtable groups have asked for us to install those on our aircraft. I think part of our lag in doing that was that we were trying to make a decision on where our future fleet was going to be. And so instead of installing those on aircraft and taking them out of service to do that, we have been returning a lot of those aircraft, the leases on those aircraft, those E320s. So, and replacing them with new MAX aircraft that are about 40% quieter than our existing fleet. So we are, sometimes it seems like a simple change to install something to reduce noise really impacts a much bigger investment decision for an airline. And so our delay in addressing that was related to this really much bigger fleet decision. So it's going to end up being an aircraft replacement versus an existing aircraft modification.
Thanks, Lene, and thanks, Kevin. I think those are helpful explanations. Okay, let's go on to the next one. The slides were a bit blurry before the recording is posted. Can the focus of these slides showing all the flight tracks, etc., be sharpened? Thank you, really informative. Thank you for letting us know. Oh, so yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Raquel, I got this one. So yeah, honestly, I'm glad somebody's actually looking at the boards and they're not just like an afterthought. We will notify our technical team and hopefully we'll get those cleared up a little bit before we get them on the web page. But they will be posted on the website, I believe either tonight or first thing in the morning. But thanks for letting us know that. We'll let our technical team know who are listening in and they'll see what they can do to get that cleared up.
Thanks, Joe. And I guess I'm wondering, because like I mentioned earlier, the boards are posted online. If that is also an issue with the boards that we have posted online, I guess we should address that as well, right?
So yeah, Raquel, this is Marina. I'd like to add in, yeah, the boards that are available on the FAA Community Involvement website, those are just the static boards. It's not the video of the boards. The FAA will be posting that video content separately. So when one opens the PDF file for the static boards, the view should be pretty crisp. Please let us know if you don't find it that way, because I understand there are some challenges sometimes in internet connectivity, and I just want to make sure everybody has access to that information.
Yeah, thanks, Marina, for at least saying that the ones, if you go look in the website, at the very least, they should be clearer. So that's good to know. Okay, next one. There were at least 2 lies in that presentation. They are not flying OPD over us, and the bricks has not changed in the last months. They have not changed in 5 years. They're still barely clearing our house, often only 2,000 feet over us. This is so infuriating. And again, we are very sympathetic to the community's concerns. I think, Joe, I feel like you have answered this question. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, Raquel, I'd like to add that, with the BRICS procedure, it was designed as an ODP, but what you have to keep in mind is the controllers may need to vector to sequence, right? So once that happens, then they're usually not going to be on the ODP anymore, and they're going to be taking instructions from the air traffic controller. So that may be what you're seeing happen. I don't know, but I believe, I want to say it was like 76% of the aircraft are vectored off of the brick star. So that may be what you're experiencing. I don't know. I don't know where the location is exactly, but just remember, if it's only an ODP, if they're flying it the entire way.
And
Dan, did you have more to add?
Yeah, I might add that actually the bricks was never designed to be an OPD below 12,000 feet. That procedure, because it is on top of the bodega arrival that's directly beneath it, and it needs to miss the surfer arrival, that procedure stops at 12,000 feet, and then it truly is dependent on air traffic when it's safe to issue the descent and let them fly. When we can, we do try to issue a descent clearance in a timely manner so that it feels like an OPD, but that procedure is dependent on the two San Francisco arrival procedures.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty good illustration, at least to me, of sort of what you're trying to manage, right? The different layers of flight routes and the challenges that we're facing. So hopefully that answer was helpful. Paul, I have a note that you had your hand up for the surfer discussion. That was a long time ago. I hope this doesn't put you on the spot, but was there anything else you wanted to add to that? I do feel like I'd love to, any opportunity that we have our experts here to speak to some of what we're talking about. I really want folks to hear from you.
Sure. Thanks, Raquel. Yeah, I was just going to make a comment earlier, and this kind of ties a lot of things together. From the pilot perspective, and even from an airline company perspective, we love to fly OPDs. I mean, there's a few things that are more satisfying to a pilot than starting your descent from 35,000 feet, having the engines come to idle, and not having the engines come up again until about 1,000 feet above the ground. That's the perfect arrival. Does that happen every time? No, it doesn't. But that's the goal. And there was a comment about speed brakes earlier. Pilots hate using speed brakes. They're only used when you just are in a pickle and you have to do it. And again, these procedures are designed to not have to do that, but this is a very, very dynamic environment, and sometimes you just have to. But all in all, there's so many different things that go into all these procedures. I mean, if there was one kind of big takeaway, I think, from this evening is it's all about priorities. And we would love to, do that OPD and be an idle descent at every single time. We try to do that. There's so many competing priorities that it doesn't work all the time. As it's been mentioned tonight, safety is certainly the number one thing. And then efficiency and noise and so forth are all the factors that go into the mix. And it's just a work of everybody on this panel, not to mention dozens and dozens of other people that have put literally hundreds of hours into projects like the Metroplex project in Northern California to make this all as best as we can make it. But I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, Paul, really appreciate your input on that. And I know we haven't touched on Surfer in a little bit, and I guess I'll just say it again. I think I mentioned it earlier. We never say that it's a one and done conversation, that we will be working with the community roundtables should they wish to submit new recommendations. And like we said before, again, if there are new safety criteria, new technologies, I mean, those are always opportunities to look at the issue again. Okay, thanks. Then, oh, this one's easy. Please provide the FAA community engagement website address. So it's faa.gov/air_traffic/community_involvement. Honestly, though, I think if you did a Google search and you said FAA Community Engagement NorCal Workshop or something like that, I think that would show up, right? Marina.
And just to add for folks that registered this evening via the Zoom registration, it's the same website that you access to sign up.
Great, thanks very much. Okay, next question. So this whole presentation basically is to tell us that we will continue to be awakened during the wee hours of the morning by extremely loud jets. Is the FAA doing anything to address the type and age of large jets allowed to fly in at night or during the day for that matter? I am near the southern San Mateo County line, and there's a huge range of noise and duration of noise, including some that actually feel like vibration. So I think we talked a little bit about aircraft types and kind of the process or the sort of the considerations that go into that. I do, and we did talk about the fact that, you know, it's really the demand that is driving the time of day or time of night for that matter when aircraft are flying. Let me see if there's anything here from any of our panelists who would like to speak a little bit to that. I think we kind of touched on it earlier, but it's possible that they did not hear some of the conversation. Would anybody like to speak to that at all? And I apologize, I have to kind of scroll through the screens a little bit.
Raquel, I'll speak to it. This is Kevin from United.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
You know, the perception is one of the things they talked about was the weather and the decrease in the efficiency at San Francisco. You go from a 54 arrival rate. When the stratus moves in, you drop to 30 to 36, depending on what the actual drop is. So what that tends to do, that backs the aircraft up. So as you know, San Francisco has the stratus in the morning, the stratus in the evening. So those flights that were scheduled to arrive at 9 o'clock might not be arriving until 11 o'clock, which now the departure is delayed. So that's why sometimes the operation seems to run much later in the early morning to 1 a.m. Generally, our scheduled flights generally knock off at around 10:30. It's just when that weather drives those delays because the reduced efficiency that the operation runs later into the evening.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks. I mean, I think that's really helpful to kind of put in all the different factors that come into play as well. Let me see. If I'm not seeing anything else, I'm going to move on. And again, I'll look to the team to let me know if there's somebody else who wants to speak to that. But I think we have a few more questions. So let's see. Question for airlines here. If airlines care so much about noise impacts, why not comply with massive public desire for slightly longer vectoring? For example, out over the ocean after GOBS for SFO departures to the LA basin. If fuel efficiency is the concern, then why not fly more slowly? Given the complexity and importance of the Bay Area Metroplex to your business, this should be able to be accommodated. Since it is actually a question for the airlines, I'm going to look on the screen to see if folks would like to speak to that.
Okay, this is Louis. I can help a little bit. Yeah, the airlines do care very much about noise because noise really equates to more emissions. The more noise we make, that means more emissions, more fuel burn, and more items that we have to manage within the airplane and in the air traffic system. But I want to be sure that there's an understanding. If we fly a longer vector, that means more noise. It means more emissions and more fuel burn. It doesn't mean a reduction in fuel. It means we will be flying noisy because the airplane will have to be powered up to stay on a longer flight path, longer, and create more noise. Additionally, the aircraft that we fly all fly at very efficient speeds. Flying slower actually means that we would have to fly or burn more fuel, more noise, because to fly slower, we have to add drag to the aircraft, which is the drag devices on the airplane, like flaps on the back of the wing, slats on the front of the wing. Those cause the engines to power up and create more noise. So when we build these procedures with the FAA does a tremendous job of first ensuring safety is the foremost goal. Then we look at all the other things. We look at noise. We look at how efficient can we make the procedures by keeping the airplane at idle as long as possible. That is our goal in every one of these procedures, because as Paul described, we do love flying OPDs because they are the most efficient, most quiet means of getting the airplane from cruise altitude onto the ground. So flying a longer vector means more noise. Flying slower means more noise. And we are all doing our best to purchase new aircraft that are much quieter. And right now, Southwest has a large fleet of Maxes, and it's increasing as we speak. And they're a very quiet airplane, but it takes a long time and a lot of dollars to make that change in fleets. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful, Gary. And again, for me, I always learn something when I listen to you. Anybody else?
I just wanted to add on to the question about the night in the hush too. One of the things that the FAA studied was when you could do it with not creating additional noise and delay for the aircraft. And as Ivar spoke to earlier, everybody gets different noise, and Milroy gets the backup noise, gets the aircraft that are taxiing to the runway, starting up the breakaway power to move forward, And as those aircraft are delayed, trying to fit Oakland and San Francisco together, you're going to see an increased noise there. You're going to see the noise last longer. So that's part of the reason why those time frames were chosen.
Thank you, Kevin. Anybody else from the airlines would like to speak to this? I feel like we had pretty good responses. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next question, because it looks like there's still a lot. Okay, so this one is back to Surfer. About Surfer, what were the specific constraints that led to this decision? The entire presentation was misleading and omitted key information. So I hope, we want to make sure that it is clear. So I know that Joe walked through all of the sort of conditions that we were unable to meet. Joe, would you like to speak to those again? It's possible that the person who asked the question may not have heard that, and just kind of walk through, all the different considerations in the process of designing the procedure.
Sure, Raquel. So the first thing is, there were 9 recommendations. We couldn't meet a lot of them. The first one was to cross Monterey Bay shoreline at above 12,500 feet and to overfly fewer people. So that first one right there, we weren't able to meet. We have to cross the shoreline anywhere between 10 and 15,000 for criteria. So we couldn't meet that one. The second one would be the Menlo Waypoint at or above 5,000 and idle power all the way to Heman Waypoint. Again, we can't ensure that. One, Menlo's not on the new procedure or the current surfer procedure, so we can't ensure that. Eddie is at 6,000, and then they would go to side-by if they stay on, but again, we can't ensure that it'll be on idle power all the way to He-Man Waypoint. Again, these were all things that we couldn't do due to the current criteria that we have in place now. In the future, who knows? We may have some other stuff come around. GBAS was mentioned. There's other things out there that may be in the future. We just don't know right now. But as of right now, we can't meet those criteria. Therefore, we are not presently moving surfer.
Raquel, may I speak about Menlo just a moment?
Absolutely, Gary.
That Menlo was a waypoint.
Is Gary still speaking and we're not hearing him?
I think he froze. He froze for me.
Gary, could you repeat it? I think we lost you for a little bit there.
Yes, can you hear me okay now? Okay. Yeah, I want to speak about Menlo just a little bit because that intersection or waypoint and the altitude at that waypoint underwent a considerable amount of research. When we started the project with NorCal and the Metroplex, we knew that we were too high at Menlo. And being too high for a pilot is one of the worst scenarios that we can be put in that close to the airport. So crossing Menlo at 5 forced us not only to put the flaps down, a considerable amount of flaps, and that creates noise, we also had to extend the landing gear to be able to make that crossing restriction and then fly a stable approach. And a stable approach means that we have to be on our approach speed with our landing checklist completed at 1,000 feet above the ground. We were finding that we could not comply with that. And that's a big safety reason for that with crossing Menlo at 5,000 feet. So the study, we used all the data possible, our simulators and all the aircraft. We reviewed all of this. And the design that we have today without Menlo on it was an improvement on that to make it quieter. So we are crossing through that area at idle today at the appropriate altitude for all these new aircraft that we fly. The importance of this is all of us have made modifications to make them quieter to our airplane. The winglets that you see are to make the airplane more efficient and quieter. All these things that you see that we're installing are to try to make things more efficient, less emissions, and quieter as we fly into these airports. And all these procedures that we fly have to take that into account. And that's the FAA criteria that they are speaking about. So flying this star, crossing that shoreline at 12.5, the airplanes can't do it. That's why the 10,000 foot is the bottom altitude in that block. That's a safety issue. Eddie is as high as we can possibly get it. And it was put at that point to ensure that the rest of the flight, if we flew the procedures from there to the airport, would be at idle to 1,000 feet. It is a pure idle descent when air traffic can allow those to be flown. But again, safety's first, and there's times when we can't. So I just wanted to speak a little bit about the designs, how hard we worked on those to make them better and quieter. And I think we achieved those goals when we worked with the FAA. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate your input on that. I know you're very much involved in those procedure design work groups. Let's see here. I just lost all my questions. Hold on a second. Oh, Lordy. Okay, here we go. Okay, this is a question for the airlines. I think maybe this we already touched on as well, but let's ask it again. Why haven't airlines retrofitted their A320s to reduce noise, and how can they move forwards faster? I don't know which airlines specifically have A320s, but I think there was some discussion on this earlier.
Yeah, from Alaska Airlines, I mentioned that the
There you go.
retrofit was directly related to our fleet decision. And so it did take us longer to get to that fleet decision But I think by the end of 2023, I think all of those aircraft will be out of our fleet, and that we are retiring them on a pretty regular basis. So there aren't very many of those A320s left flying in our fleet right now.
Thanks very much, Lene. Kevin, I see you unmuted. Yes?
Oh, I was just going to follow up. I thought I addressed that earlier. United has put the trim tabs on a lot of the Airbuses, and we are replacing our aircraft with quieter, more fuel efficient aircraft.
Yep. Okay, thanks very much. All right, this is a BRICS question. We were told that the BRICS procedure could not be changed until the surfer was changed, but you changed BRICS. Why? I think Joe is our BRICS expert.
Yes, so Raquel, that's correct. So we did change BRICS. The reason why we changed BRICS was to address the minimum en route altitude, the MEA issue on the plate. That was a safety issue that needed to be rectified or corrected, and that's why we did it. So we also took into effect or consideration that when we were looking at the new BRICS and changing the MEA, that we wanted something that would work with both the current surfer and the proposed surfer from the select committee. So both of those were taken into consideration in development.
Great. Thanks very much, Joe. We have another question here, back to surfer. Given that 1.2 R1 surfer update is infeasible, I think that's referring to how we were considering this particular recommendation. When will the FAA start working with the Santa Clara Santa Cruz Roundtable on a new surfer flight procedure as described in Select Committee Recommendation 1.2 R4? Okay, so recommendation 1.2, is it 1.2.4 or R4? I'm not really sure exactly, but I think one of the things that we definitely said was we will work with any community roundtables that will provide us or send us a new set of recommendations. I would hope that they would have some flexibility. The one thing that I note is that if you were to stick to the conditions that they are today, it's a challenge, right? Because we've already said we've provided or we've developed the amended surfer that best meets that. So it would have to be a different set of conditions, I guess is what I would say. But yes, we will be happy to work with the community roundtables should they wish to pursue something different from what was previously recommended. Let's see, before I move on, just want to make sure anybody else want to speak to that. Okay. Let's see, next question. The design of flights over the Santa Cruz Mountains doesn't appear to take into account the height of those mountains, which can be over 3,000 feet. Why isn't that taken into account? I think we take that into account.
Again.
Joe,
Yep,
yeah.
it's me again. So when procedure is designed, that is, terrain is taken into account. The flight procedure specialists have our TERP specialists. They consider terrain, they consider all sorts of things. Antennas, cell phone towers, all those things are all looked at in the design process when doing new procedures or even amending current procedures. Those are all taken into account. So long story short, it is looked at and it is considered.
Thanks a lot, Joe. I am looking at the time and I see that we have exceeded the 8 o'clock mark. I do want to respect folks' time and family lives, etc. So I'm gonna see, let's see, there's really not that many more, but let's just go to a, I was gonna go to a question that was not necessarily one that has been asked before, so I'm gonna go to one. Okay, this one is on the Rebas Waypoint. Can the Rebas Waypoint be moved over the bay, i.e. to lessen the ever-increasing concentration of flights on the night and hush departures over Point Richmond, California? Originally, this area was industrial, but now it is residential, and the placement of Rebas concentrates northeast flights and also arrivals more and more over one residential and parklands locale. Melissa or Fan, would you be able to address this question?
I'm actually going to defer to Than if she has the answer.
Rebus is the existing waypoint on the night hush, and it could be looked at to move that over the bay. But like we kind of talked about earlier, we can't do anything in isolation. So if we had this suggestion, if this came to us, through the community group, and we looked at that, we would need to see how that would affect the arrivals that are on top of that and how it would affect the other departures. So I couldn't say off the top of my head that it couldn't be moved over the bay, but I also can't say that it can be. We have to look at the system as a whole and see if that was something that's feasible.
All right, thank you, Fan. I think we probably do need to end, and so I'll say that that is our last question for the evening. So thank you very much to our audience. I see there are still at least 161 participants. Thank you so much to our panel. We have listened and we certainly understand your concerns, but I hope that the folks who did listen came away with an improved understanding of the Northern California airspace, what and how the FAA has addressed the recommendations from the Bay Area communities and the officials, and perhaps most importantly, why sometimes, despite dedicating significant resources to really seriously try to implement the recommendations, we are not always able to make all the changes that the communities want exactly as requested. We've shown that we have a combination of a dense population on the ground, a busy, complex, constrained airspace. And, as I think, hopefully you've heard us say it enough times throughout this meeting, that while our primary priority is safety, we are very much taking the community concern seriously, and that we will continue to work with the roundtables moving forward. So thanks so much for attending. We heard so many good questions. I hope our answers were informative. Thank you to our specialists for providing your expertise. Like I said, I did learn from you tonight. We are sorry we weren't able to answer all of the questions, but I feel like we did answer almost all of them, at least from what I can tell from the questions that were coming in. We do have one more workshop tomorrow at 1 p.m. And last but not least, I want to say that this presentation and discussion do not constitute a final agency action or an order issued by the Secretary of Transportation under Title 49, United States Code Section 46110. This meeting was informational only and is part of an ongoing dialogue between the FAA and their external stakeholders. You may find out more information on the Northern California airspace on our website, and I think we provided that address earlier. So have a good evening, everybody, and thank you again so much.